Let's begin with an exploration of emotion. We tend to think of emotion as a feature of our private, internal experience. Nice to have when it's pleasant, and not so nice when it's not. However, emotion is more than private aesthetics. It motivates social bonding, pro-social behavior, and activism toward ethical change. Happiness, in its fuller sense of leading a life that is meaningful in the big picture, is deeply social, ethical, and engaged. And emotion is the motivator. So emotion is not mere individualistic aesthetics. It is the kinetic energy of action in the world. In fact, there is some evidence to suggest it is instrumental in decision-making. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio found that brain-damaged patients with injuries to emotion centers experienced difficulty making up their minds. They kept weighing pros and cons, even for something as trivial as what kind of milk to buy, and could not come to a decision. This suggests emotion is far more integrated with reason than often thought. In fact, all three of the capacities that we're studying are deeply interdependent. To express this, I'd like to use the metaphor of a flourishing tree. Here you can see the logo of the Spiritual Naturalist Society, a beautiful arboreal image of life. Now, what does it take for a tree to flourish? Multiple conditions have to come together to make it possible. You need nutrient-rich earth to grow in, sunlight to provide energy, and of course, a seed. Earth, sun, and seed must work together to conduce to the tree's flourishing. In the same way, the three capacities that we're studying must all come together in the right way to conduce to our flourishing. Emotion, reason, and practice work together. We're going to look specifically at emotion now, but it will be good to keep this interdependence in mind. Religion often evokes powerful emotion. Its ritual, architecture, and stories inspire awe, wonder, love, gratitude, and so on. Now, there's nothing inherently religious about these emotions. They're common to all humanity. Yet, most atheist and agnostic organizations struggle to create anything equally moving. Why? There are likely many reasons, but one is surely the refusal of some to consider anything that bears even the slightest whiff of religion about it, thereby throwing away many of the most time-tested techniques that have evolved for cultivating emotion. Spiritual naturalists differ from such folk insofar as we are not allergic to religion in this sense. We are willing to learn from and even engage in many of the practices of traditional religion, trusting our naturalistic outlook to keep us grounded while exploring what the full legacy of human culture has to offer. Many communities of spiritual naturalism have ways of working with emotion, whether through evocative narratives of nature and cosmos, or practices like secular Buddhist meditation or humanistic Jewish Shabbat. Often, however, the emotional aspect is either unarticulated and thus difficult to explore in depth, or else articulated in traditional terms, not easily compared with the best current scientific research. To remedy this, and to get an idea of what's going on in these techniques under the hood, so to speak, we're going to look at a scientific model of emotion called appraisal theory. Now, if you are new to spiritual naturalism, this will provide a strong, evidence-based foundation from which to explore further. And if you are already experienced in spiritual naturalism, it may afford a fresh look and perhaps a vocabulary with which to bridge tradition and science. Now, this model may feel a bit heady at first, but with close attention to your own daily experience and a little practice, it will soon come to feel intuitive on a gut level. At that point, you'll be able to watch emotion playing out in you in higher resolution than ever before, and you'll be able to cultivate emotion in a way that is nuanced and empowered. It's like learning how to move your body in martial arts or dance. We all already know how to move, but with a deeply integrated systematic approach, we can become virtuosos of movement. All right, so here is how appraisal theory proposes that emotion arises. First, there is a stimulus, which is the situation that you're in. It could be an external event, or it could be something happening internally, like a thought or memory. Then, very quickly and mostly unconsciously, there's a cognitive appraisal. It's where your brain interprets the situation and how it relates to you and your goals. Now, the theory goes into considerable detail here, specifying the precise variables by which the stimuli is evaluated in relation to your goals, and thereby which emotion is triggered, but we can return to that later. For now, the key point is that the way you interpret the situation determines what comes next. What comes next as a result of appraisal is a physiological response. It's what happens in your body, such as the heat and tension you feel with anger. And this is more than a private inner aesthetic touch. It alters the way you relate to yourself and the outer world by changing your attitude, behavior, and communicative signals. It may create a state of action readiness, such as the way fear narrows our mental focus and prepares us to fight or flee. Or it may manipulate nonverbal body language to communicate a signal to others, such as the way the hung head and slumped shoulders of shame signals a willingness to be reconciled with our group mates over some offense committed. So the physiological response has consequences for both inner and outer worlds by altering your attitude, behavior, and communicative signals. Finally, the experience of this whole process, the subjective feeling of it as it's happening, is what an emotion is. Now, this process unfolds over time. It begins quickly and unconsciously in order to respond as fast as possible. As it is unfolding, though, new stimuli, including bodily sensations produced by the physiological response or new input gathered on the situation, can trigger further appraisals, which we will call reappraisals. These reappraisals can alter the original emotion, producing a system that's dynamic and responsive. Now, if we look carefully here, one insight stands out boldly. How you interpret a situation determines the emotion you feel. Think about the power of that. It's enormous. Let's take an example to make it more concrete. Let's say you're walking down the street and a homeless person asks you for money. That's the stimulus. How you appraise this stimulus determines what happens next. If you look at the person and somewhere deep down, perhaps without any conscious awareness of it, you think this person looks like maybe they chose this lifestyle, maybe they got themselves into this bind, so that you believe they do not deserve your help. Your body initiates attitudes and processes that you experience as something like disdain, and which conduce to you refusing help. On the other hand, if you think they are likely to mug you, you may experience something like fear and again refuse help. Finally, if you think they may have suffered disastrous life circumstances which overwhelmed their capacity to cope, you might experience something more like compassion and begin to consider what would help the person most. Now, whether giving money is the best way to help is not what we're talking about here. What we're concerned with is the simple fact that how you interpret the situation determines the emotion you feel. It is not the world that makes us happy, sad, angry, or jealous. Rather, it is our interpretation of things that does so. And this is empowering because it means that our subjective experience is not simply at the mercy of external events. We have a measure of self-determination. We are not doomed to be angry, sad, bitter, or apathetic. With the right techniques, we can enhance the subjective quality of our lives and the ethical quality of our emotion-motivated actions. Of course, emotion alone cannot miraculously change our lives like this. As we'll explore later in the course, emotion has to be cultivated together with other natural capacities, notably reason and practice. Reason helps to ensure that our appraisals are in harmony with reality and effective for accomplishing long-term goals. Meanwhile, practice, probably the most readily acknowledged but least utilized capacity, is necessary to make lasting changes in our habits, mental habits, behavioral habits, and emotional habits. Such change is not easy, and it may take years of practice, but it can be done. To sum up, emotion arises when a stimulus is appraised as relevant to you and your goals in a certain manner, and that appraisal triggers a specific kind of physiological response. How you interpret a situation determines the emotion you will feel, leading to the insight that we can take responsibility for our emotional experience and emotion-motivated ethical actions. Thus, the role of emotion is more than private aesthetic experience. It is the motivator of social bonding, pro-social behavior, personal growth, and ethical activism. It has concrete effects on the world through us, and we can accept a measure of responsibility for that role. Combined with reason and practice, careful attention to emotion can help us live meaningfully and not wastefully, making the most of our lives in this naturalistic universe.